Hey there, welcome to Sleepy History Secrets, the channel where history gets strange but the voice stays calm. Tonight we're exploring how opium destroyed China's greatest empire, a story about silver, smoke, and the quiet collapse of a world that once believed itself unshakable. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in, adjust your pillow, maybe dim the lights. If you find yourself drifting halfway through, that's perfectly fine. The empire will still be falling, very politely in the background. And if you're still awake at the end, congratulations. You'll have survived one of the slowest, most catastrophic economic crises in human history. Now, close your eyes if you'd like. Feel the soft hum of your room, and let's drift together back to a world that made 1/3 of everything on Earth and then lost it all to a single flower. The year is 1800. You wake to the sound of wooden ships creaking in the harbour, voices rising and fading like waves. The air smells of salt, smoke, and money. Though money here doesn't clink or rustle, it glows, it shines, it has weight. Silver, measured by the handful, stacked in chests, carried through narrow streets that smell of tea and sweat. You're in Canton, the only Chinese port where foreigners are allowed to trade. Around you, the world's richest economy moves with the calm arrogance of routine. You stretch on your hard bed, a thin mat over polished wood. The ceiling fan creaks. Somewhere below, a rooster argues with a ship's horn. You don't know it yet, but this is the centre of the world, or at least it thinks it is. At this moment in history, China produces about 1/3 of everything made on Earth. Imagine one country as large and ancient as an idea, making more goods than all of Europe combined. Porcelain so thin you can see the candle behind it. Silk smooth enough to make even an emperor sigh. Tea so fragrant that English society is already addicted to it. Across the sea, European kings and merchants are begging to trade. They write letters full of flattery and gold. China's reply is simple. No, thank you. The emperor calls them barbarians, loud, unrefined, and most importantly, unnecessary. What could the Middle Kingdom possibly need from anyone else? You step outside. The heat wraps around you like a damp blanket. The street is alive with shouts in Cantonese and broken English. Porters carry crates stamped with strange markings. Silver changes hands faster than you can blink. At the harbour, the Hong merchants, the only people allowed to trade with foreigners, oversee everything. Among them stands one man everyone whispers about, Hao Kwa. He is quiet, elegant, and absurdly rich. His robes shimmer like fish scales in the sun. When his warehouse caught fire years ago, people said rivers of molten silver flowed down the street. Not a metaphor, actual rivers. You watch as he supervises the unloading of a British East India Company ship. It's a familiar ritual, silver out, tea in. The British bring their coins and carry away their comfort. Beside you, a foreign trader mutters, half in awe and half in despair. "We can't keep this up," he says. "England's running out of silver. We're drinking ourselves into bankruptcy." He's right. Every sip of tea in London means another trickle of silver into Canton. The balance of trade is a beautiful disaster. One side getting tea and porcelain, the other side getting poorer by the shipload. But inside the merchant houses, the factories as they're called, the mood isn't despairing. It's too hot for that. Clerks bend over ledgers, writing in a language of numbers that crosses all borders. Outside, boys fan the rooms to keep the ink from drying. The smell of tea leaves and sea salt fills the air. Hao Kwa moves, through it all like a conductor. Calm, efficient, untouchable. His fortune by now equals several kingdoms' annual budgets. He invests quietly in foreign banks far from the emperor's reach. He senses that nothing golden lasts forever, though it's still too early to name the storm. At sunset, you find yourself at one of Hao Kwa's banquets. Lanterns glow over long tables lined with porcelain plates, shark fin soup, bird's nest broth, pigeon eggs smaller than coins. It's a festival of wealth. But the laughter feels rehearsed. You hear American traders whispering between toasts. One of them says softly, "We're all getting rich off this, but something's wrong. We're draining them, and yet somehow they'll be the ones who suffer." He's right, though he doesn't know how right. The seeds of ruin are already being planted, in the form of small dark balls of opium sap moving quietly across the Indian Ocean. From your window that night, you see the harbour glittering under the moonlight. Ships from every corner of the world are moored there, their masts swaying like forest trees. Somewhere out on the water, one ship flies no flag. Its deck is quiet, its hatches locked. Locals avoid it. In the darkness, small boats approach and vanish again. The exchange is silent. Silver for smoke, future for profit. You lie back on your wooden bed. The air feels too heavy to breathe. Outside, the city hums with pride and exhaustion. Inside, the first hint of a new addiction drifts through the night air. Sweet, sticky, almost pleasant. It will take decades before anyone realizes that this scent, so faint and harmless now, will one day carry the weight of an empire's collapse. But for now, Canton sleeps. The richest city on earth dreams peacefully, unaware that the dream has already started to fade. Morning again. The harbour is restless, and the air already carries that thick, sweet scent that will soon define a century. You walk past barrels of tea, crates of porcelain, and bales of silk, all the treasures that once made the empire proud. And then you see something new. Wooden chests with no markings, stacked under tarps that smell faintly of earth and rain. They've come from far away, from the river plains of Bengal, where farmers now scratch scars into the green skin of the poppy plant and collect its milky sap in small clay bowls. It begins quietly, as history often does. The British East India Company, which once traded in spices and fabric, discovers that a flower is more profitable than cotton. The poppy's sap, dried into a sticky brown resin, is pressed into balls and sealed in chests. Each one weighs about as much as a small child and is worth more than its weight in silver. From Calcutta to Canton, this resin will move through a chain of hands so long that no one feels responsible for what it does at the end. You can picture the fields in Bengal. Men and women bent over rows of white and pink, poppies, the petals trembling in the wind like paper lanterns. A British officer watches from a distance, notebook in hand, counting profit instead of petals. The sap thickens in the sun, turning dark like molasses. Children roll it into balls, dry it in baskets, and stack it neatly for shipment. There is something both beautiful and terrible in the rhythm, the elegance of destruction wearing the disguise of agriculture. On the ships, the boxes are stamped with official company seals, but everyone knows what's inside. When the East India Company's monopoly ended in the 1830s, private traders rushed in to claim their share. They called it free trade. It sounded noble, even heroic, the kind of phrase you could print on a flag. In practice, it meant that the world's most powerful empire had turned itself into a narcotic supplier, with parliamentary approval. The smugglers grew creative. Large merchant ships carried tea and cotton openly, while smaller vessels shadowed them, carrying the chests that no one mentioned aloud. The island of Lintin, just outside Chinese waters, became a floating warehouse. Ships anchored there for months, transferring opium to smaller Chinese boats under the cover of fog. There were no records, no tariffs, no questions. Only silver, always silver, flowing back toward India and London. At first, the Chinese officials in Canton pretend not to notice. The empire's laws already ban the trade, but enforcement is another matter. Bribes change hands faster than the wind shifts direction. Local commanders look the other way. After all, the profits are intoxicating even before the smoke is. The foreign merchants justify it as economics. They want it, they say. We simply provide what the market demands. The phrase sounds modern, almost respectable, until you remember that the market in question is an entire civilization slowly learning to forget its mornings. In one of the trading factories, you overhear two merchants debating their plan. One of them, a Scottish doctor turned businessman named William Jardine, sketches a map of the coast. "With our new clipper ships," he says, "we can reach every port before the Chinese even see us." His partner James Matheson nods and smiles the small smile of a man who's already imagined his future fortune. Together they will build one of the largest private empires on Earth, and centuries later their company will still exist, though under a different name. You leave them there, plotting quietly in the heat, and walk down to the docks. The tide is low. You see small boats gliding out to the anchored ship with no flag. Their lanterns sway, reflections trembling like nervous stars on the water. The sailors move silently, lifting one chest after another. They work fast, practiced, almost reverent. In this strange ritual, greed has learned how to whisper. The next morning, you wander through a narrow alley near the city walls. A door half hidden behind a silk shop leads to a small room lit by oil lamps. Inside, the air feels thick and golden. Men recline on wooden platforms, eyes half closed, breathing in the smoke of paradise. The pipes are long and delicate, carved from bamboo and decorated with tiny dragons. The attendants work with quiet precision, heating the resin, turning it until it bubbles, then pressing it into the bowl. A single puff, and the world dissolves. Another, and the soul forgets the body. A third, and even time stops showing up for work. Opium isn't new here. For centuries it's been used as medicine, a tincture for pain, a cure for coughs, a gentle escort for the dying. But smoking changes everything. It's faster, cleaner, and infinitely more seductive. A luxury at first, a symbol of refinement. Officials use it to soften their long nights of paperwork. Poets use it to write slower and think faster. Then the servants begin to try it, then the workers, then the farmers. The line between indulgence and dependency fades as easily as the smoke itself. By evening, the harbour glows again with lantern light. The foreigners gather in Hauqua's counting house, where the walls are hung with maps and ledgers that smell faintly of ink and ambition. The Chinese merchants talk softly, pretending not to notice that the silver piles on the table are growing smaller each month. Across the water, another shipment leaves Lintin Island. The chests are heavier now, 12,000 this year, maybe more. You can sense the change, even if no one else admits it. The empire that once sold tea to the world now imports dreams. The richest city on earth is about to become the most profitable trap ever built. When you return to your small room that night, the air outside feels different, quieter, as if the city itself is holding its breath. The moonlight catches on the river's surface, turning it pale and metallic. You can almost imagine that it's liquid silver, flowing away from China toward the waiting hands of men who will never taste the tea they helped to poison. Somewhere out on the dark water, a ship begins to move. Its sails catch the faint breeze, and the creak of its rope sounds almost like a sigh. You don't know it yet, but you've just watched the beginning of the end, the moment when a flower learned to sail. The morning sun pours through the shutters like melted brass. The harbour is loud again. Shouts, drums, seagulls, the scrape of wooden crates against stone. Somewhere nearby, a kettle whistles, and you remember that this whole empire, this entire fragile balance of wealth and greed, begins and ends with a single drink. Tea, the most ordinary miracle in human history. The leaves grow on mist-covered mountains, far from here, picked by hands that never see a coin of the fortune they create. Dried, packed, and sent downriver, they become a currency of calm, traded for silver, stored in porcelain, served in delicate cups, thousands of miles away in drawing rooms that smell of perfume and self-importance. By the year 1830, England alone drinks more than 300 million cups a year, an amount so large it feels like a shared addiction politely disguised as culture. To pay for all that tea, England needs silver, and silver only comes from one place, here. It pours into China through the port of Canton, coin by coin, chest by chest, a metallic river feeding the world's richest empire. For a time, it seems eternal, until it isn't. You hear a British trader complaining near the quay, his voice sharp and tired. "We can't keep this up," he mutters. "We're drinking our fortune away." His companion nods, eyes on the horizon. "Then we'll give them something else to buy." That something else has already begun to slip ashore under moonlight. Chests of opium traded for silver, then silver traded back for tea. The triangle closes neatly, like a snake swallowing its own tail. You walk through the foreign factories, the long narrow buildings where trade is conducted under the heavy watch of Chinese officials. Inside, the air smells of paper and salt. Ledgers line the walls, their neat columns of numbers hiding the chaos they describe. It looks so rational, so calm, just figures, weights, prices. But every line on the page is a heartbeat of addiction, a family sold, a field left unplanted. You pass a group of young clerks counting coins by lamplight. They look too innocent to be villains, yet the stacks of silver in front of them are the bones of the empire they work within. Outside, the streets are changing. You notice it first in the faces. There's a thinness, a kind of shimmer in the eyes. The wealthy merchants who once boasted of virtue now keep private rooms filled with smoke. Government officials bring their pipes to meetings, hiding them in silk sleeves when someone knocks. A scent hangs over the city, not quite pleasant, not quite foul. The smell of poppy sap turned to ash. It follows you everywhere, through alleys, through temples, through the dreams of the city itself. An American missionary you meet at a tea house shakes his head slowly. The smoke goes up, he says, and the silver goes down. He's right. The balance of trade has reversed. Silver, which once flowed into China like rain into a valley, is now bleeding out toward the sea. In just a few years, the price of silver inside China has nearly doubled. A farmer in the north might sell a season's harvest and still not afford the same amount of coin he could just a decade earlier. You don't need to understand economics to see the truth. The empire is quietly running out of breath. At night, the docks no longer sleep. Small boats move like insects across the water, carrying their forbidden cargo to hidden coves. Local smugglers ferry the chests upriver to towns where officials pretend not to see. And in return, the silver trickles, back. Smaller each time, like a tide that has forgotten how to return. You find yourself back at Haokua's mansion one evening. The merchant's hair has turned more silver than black now. He sits in silence, a fan in one hand, watching his clerks count the day's receipts. The lamps cast long shadows over the room's lacquered walls. His American partners speak quietly nearby. "It's the perfect trade," one of them says. "We sell them what they want, we buy what we want, nobody loses." Haokua doesn't answer. He knows better. The numbers in his ledger tell another story. His profits rise, yes, but the city around him grows thinner, slower, dimmer. He's moved much of his fortune overseas now, invested in safe banks where the emperor's tax collectors can't reach. He smiles politely when they toast his success, but his eyes stay fixed on the window, where the wind carries a faint trace of the same smoke that feeds his wealth. Later, you wander through the markets. A woman sits by a stall selling dried fish. She looks up as you pass and gestures toward her empty basket. "No customers," she says softly. "They have money for smoke, not food." A few stalls down, a child tugs at his father's sleeve, begging for something you can't see. The man hands over a coin, not to buy rice, but to pay for a pinch of brown resin wrapped in paper. By the time you return to the harbour, a storm is rising. Lightning flashes far out at sea, illuminating the hulks of ships anchored off Linton Island. Their outlines appear for a moment, then vanish again into the dark. On deck, sailors move like ghosts, guarding their silent treasure. The rain begins to fall, soft at first, then steady, washing the dust from the roofs and the gilt from no one. You think about the irony of it all. The empire that invented paper, printing, and the compass now finds itself undone by its own stillness. The merchants chase profit as if profit itself were medicine. The officials write reports describing everything except the truth. The foreign traders call it progress. And somewhere in the chaos, an invisible flower has become the new currency of the world. As the rain beats against your window, you hear the creak of the ships in the harbour, the heartbeat of a system that doesn't know it's dying. Tea, silver and smoke. 3 simple things, each harmless alone, each fatal together. The richest trade network on Earth has turned into a loop that feeds on itself, and you are standing in the middle of it, breathing the air of a dream that's already starting to rot. Tomorrow the city will wake again, the ships will unload, the tea will be packed, the pipes will be lit, and the silver will continue its quiet migration out to sea. A glittering river carrying the Empire's lifeblood away, one coin at a time. Evening settles over Canton like a layer of lacquer, glossy, warm, and hard to breathe through. Lanterns flicker along, the riverbank, their reflections trembling in the slow current. Tonight, Haokwa is hosting another banquet. It feels almost ritualistic now, a performance of wealth, for guests who already know how the story ends but pretend otherwise. You arrive early and stand in the courtyard surrounded by servants carrying trays of jade cups and porcelain bowls. The air smells of lotus soup, sandalwood, and the faint tang of the river. Inside, the hall glows with gold. Candles drip onto bronze stands shaped like dragons. Every surface seems polished to the point of vanity. Lacquered tables, mirrored screens, silver dishes reflecting firelight. Haokwa sits at the head of the table, his robe the colour of deep plum, embroidered with cranes that look ready to fly away. Around him are foreign guests in stiff collars and linen suits, fanning themselves with folded newspapers that report their own success. The first course arrives, shark fin soup in bowls as thin as eggshells. Then comes bird's nest broth, steamed duck, salted fish, preserved fruit. The plates arrive in endless procession, as though the kitchen itself refuses to accept limits. A Scottish merchant raises his glass. To prosperity, he declares. The others echo him, their voices blurring into a hum of forced enthusiasm. You notice Haokwa smile politely but drink little. He has learned long ago that too much indulgence tastes like defeat. Still, he plays the host with perfect grace. When he lifts his cup, the room lifts with him. He listens to his guests discuss markets and moralities. One American trader insists that opium is a necessary evil. A British captain counters that it's not evil at all, just business. If they didn't want it, he says, they wouldn't buy it. It sounds convincing in the moment, like all simple lies do. Later in the evening, the conversation turns to numbers. Always numbers. Profits doubled, shipments tripled, silver prices soaring. They speak as if they've discovered perpetual motion. Silver goes out, opium comes in, and both sides seem richer until you remember that wealth can also mean ruin wearing perfume. Haokwa listens quietly. He's seen fortunes rise and fall too often to believe in infinity. He knows that when the balance tips too far, someone must pay the difference. His eyes wander to the window where the night hums with insects and distant thunder. There's a ship out there tonight, another one, carrying its cargo of dreams and decay. He wonders how long before even the Emperor feels the sting. A servant refills his cup with jasmine tea. The scent cuts through the heaviness of the room, sharp and clean, almost medicinal. For a brief moment, the conversation softens. Someone asks about Haokwa's beginnings. He smiles faintly, remembering simpler days, carrying silk bolts on his back, counting coins under candlelight, believing that honesty could keep the world in order. The memory fades quickly. The empire has changed, and so has he. Across the table, one of the American guests leans in. "You know," he says with a sly grin, "some of our most respected families started in this trade. In Boston, in New York. Fortunes built from a flower. It's not a sin, it's opportunity." The others laugh, and for a moment the sound feels almost innocent. They're not monsters, you realise, just men who've learned to confuse profit with purpose. Outside, the night wind rattles the paper screens. Beyond the walls, Canton continues its quiet transformation. Opium dens bloom like evening flowers. Families sell heirlooms to buy another night of forgetting. The government sends edicts against the trade, but the words dissolve long before they reach the coast. In the alleys, the smoke curls upward like a prayer that no one answers. As the banquet drags on, a Chinese scholar at the far end of the table begins quoting poetry. His voice trembles slightly, either from wine or from the weight of the words. "The sea is boundless," he recites. "One drop of poison can turn it black." No one responds. The foreigners smile politely. The host changes the subject. The party resumes. You step outside for air. The river smells of iron and salt. The night is heavy with humidity, and the stars above are hidden behind thin clouds. You watch servants unload crates from a small boat moored nearby. They move quickly, quietly, the practiced rhythm of secrecy. One crate slips, cracks open. Inside, you glimpse the dull brown bricks of opium wrapped in waxed paper. The worker freezes, then hurriedly closes the box. For a heartbeat, everything feels still. You, the river, the city, as if the entire empire has inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. When you return inside, the banquet is winding down. Guests lean back in their chairs, flushed from drink and self-satisfaction. Hao stands to make a final toast. His voice is calm, almost detached. "May fortune favour those who remember its cost," he says. The words hang in the air like smoke, light, visible, then gone. Later, as you walk home through narrow streets lit by dying lanterns, you pass a tea shop still open at midnight. Inside, a young man slumps over the counter, eyes glazed, a pipe slipping from his hand. The shopkeeper waves incense to mask the smell, but the sweet, burnt scent lingers. Two soldiers outside pretend not to notice. You keep walking. The city feels unsteady now. The same streets that once sang with commerce hum instead with whispers. You can sense the shape of something vast and invisible pressing down on everything, a weight that isn't war yet, but feels like it's rehearsal. The merchants still celebrate, the ledgers still shine, the coins still clink. But the foundation beneath them, moral, economic, human, has begun to soften like wood left too long in the rain. Back in your small room, you sit by the window and watch the reflections of lanterns quiver on the black water. The laughter from the banquet hall drifts faintly through the humid air. Somewhere upriver, a poppy field in Bengal sways under moonlight. The petals tremble, the sap thickens. The chests are already being packed. It's strange, you think, how empires fall. Not with earthquakes, but with parties. Not with rebellion, but with routine. The richest city on earth has turned into a banquet that never ends, where everyone toasts prosperity, while the floor quietly sinks beneath their feet. You close your eyes. Outside, the river keeps moving, silver and dark. In the distance, thunder rolls. The flower has found its sea legs, and the empire, though still pretending to dance, has already begun to drown. Morning rises over Canton with the heavy stillness of habit. The city no longer wakes, it merely drifts upward, as if floating inside its own exhaled smoke. The river moves slowly, thick with boats and reflections that blur into one another. You walk along the quay, where tea crates and silk bundles still line the docks, but the air smells different now, faintly sweet, faintly wrong. Somewhere nearby, a pipe has just been lit. The Empire has learned to float, not in triumph, but in forgetfulness. You pass a group of dock workers resting in the shade, their tools beside them, their laughter lazy and distant. One of them lies back with a pipe balanced across his chest. Another waits his turn, eyes half closed, already halfway gone. Above them, banners flutter with the characters for prosperity and virtue. The irony is almost too neat to notice. In the merchant district, the change is even clearer. Where once there were shops full of spices and porcelain, there are now quiet doorways with curtains drawn. The interiors are dim, almost peaceful. A lamp, a mat, a pipe. Men who once argued over silver prices now lie motionless, smoke curling from their lips like prayers that forgot their purpose. The attendants move silently, refilling lamps, trimming wicks, wiping away the ash. No one talks about addiction. They talk about cloud riding. The phrase sounds poetic, a delicate way to describe surrender. The scholar calls it meditation. The merchant calls it rest. The servant calls it a moment of mercy between endless hours. But in every name, the same silence grows. You wander into a tea house that doubles as an opium parlour after dusk. Inside, the air hangs heavy, layered with incense and resignation. At a corner table, two officials in silk robes argue quietly about tax quotas, pausing between each sentence to inhale. Their voices slow with each breath, the argument dissolving into a calm that feels like defeat disguised as serenity. A poet at the next table scribbles verses he'll never finish. You glance over his shoulder and see the last line repeated again and again. The flower forgets the garden. Outside, the clerks in the foreign factories keep their ledgers tidy. The numbers still rise and the silver still flows, only in the wrong direction. Every chest of opium that lands here pulls another tide of silver away, back toward Calcutta, toward London, toward anything that isn't China. The imperial treasuries shrink, but the reports sent to Beijing stay full of polite optimism. On paper, everything is fine. On the streets, even the beggars have learned to smoke. The British merchants talk openly now. There is no need for secrecy. The profit is too vast to hide. They call it the Golden Triangle, as if it were a geometric miracle rather than a moral collapse. Opium sails from India to China. Silver sails from China to India. Tea sails from China to England. The ships follow the same circular path year after year, a great mechanical breath that grows richer and hollower with every exhale. You meet a missionary near the docks, an old man from Boston, face burnt red by the sun. He has spent years trying to preach abstinence and faith to men who no longer believe in either. They are drowning, he says quietly, not in water but in comfort. You ask him if he thinks it can be stopped. He shakes his head. No empire ever stopped a habit it enjoyed. By now, the statistics have become legend. 4,000 chests a year once seemed enormous. Now there are 40,000, each one holding enough resin to numb a province. That's more than £5 million of opium, a figure so large it feels unreal, easier to picture as smoke than as substance. And smoke at least feels light. In a mansion overlooking the river, an aging scholar tries to hold his household together. His servants whisper about unpaid wages. His sons pawn jewellery to settle debts. He forbids opium in his home but smells it every evening from the neighbouring courtyards. When he visits the local magistrate to complain, the man's eyes are glassy, his smile distant. The scholar returns home and locks his study, determined to keep one place pure. That night, his eldest son slips in through the back door, eyes bright, carrying a pipe. In the countryside, farmers find that silver has grown scarce. Taxes are still demanded in coin, not grain. A man might sell a year's harvest and still come up short. To dull the hunger, he lights a pipe and exhales his responsibilities into the air. Even the fields begin to change. In the southern provinces, the poppy replaces rice. Its flowers shimmer in the wind, beautiful and treacherous, a landscape painted in addiction. Back in Canton, the Emperor's officials finally start to worry. Reports pile up describing empty warehouses, soldiers too weak to drill, and bureaucrats who spend more time reclining than ruling. A few brave voices call for reform, demanding that the foreign trade be shut down entirely. But the smugglers are protected by more than money now. They have diplomacy, treaties, and the convenient fog of moral indifference. At night, the opium dens are full. The city's heartbeat slows to the rhythm of 1,000, pipes being tapped against wooden trays. You step inside one, drawn by curiosity or pity. It's hard to tell which. The room glows amber under low lamps. The customers lie side by side, each on their own small island of oblivion. The air is sweet, thick, hypnotic. You stand for a moment, feeling the heat of the lamps and the faint vibration of the floor as someone drops a coin outside. Then you leave. You've seen enough to understand how silence spreads faster than sound. Back in your lodging, you can hear the rain on the roof and the echo of a single phrase in your mind. Everyone floats. The empire floats too, above its own reflection, believing that stillness means safety. The merchants still feast. The ships still arrive. The emperor still dreams of stability. But somewhere between the tea leaves and the smoke, the foundation has started to drift apart. And in the darkness outside, another kind of wind is rising. Smells of salt and iron and the faint promise of reckoning. You can almost hear it approaching across the sea, the future clearing its throat. The wind finally changes. The air that drifts down from the north carries the scent of ink and authority. Somewhere in Beijing, the emperor has woken from a long, uneasy calm. Reports from Canton have become impossible to ignore. Soldiers asleep at their posts, merchants bribing their own judges, opium smoke curling through every layer of society. Even palace attendants whisper of addiction. The court's patience, which once seemed eternal, begins to crack. And so, the emperor does what emperors always do when the world stops obeying. He sends a man. His name is Lin Zexu. A scholar, a governor, a believer in order and balance, and perhaps most dangerously, a man who still thinks the empire can be saved by reason. He travels south for weeks, his carriage rolling past flooded rice fields and half-empty villages. Along the way, he writes, reads, and refuses to smoke anything stronger than tea. People who meet him later say his eyes never wavered, even when everyone else looked away. When he arrives in Canton, the city stiffens. Soldiers polish their armour. Officials burn records. Merchants pretend they have nothing to hide, though the air itself smells guilty. Lin moves through the streets without raising his voice. He inspects warehouses, interviews traders, counts confiscated pipes. Every report he reads tells the same story in different handwriting. Decay disguised as prosperity. He orders immediate action. The local governor hesitates, mumbling about delicate trade relations. Lin replies with the calm of a man sharpening a blade. "We cannot trade virtue for silver," he says. Then he begins to clean house. At the foreign factories near the waterfront, merchants suddenly find their warehouses surrounded. Soldiers stand at every gate, silent but very awake. Lin issues a command. All opium must be surrendered within 3 days. No exceptions, no negotiations. The merchants panic. Some plead that they only hold small quantities. Others argue that destroying the opium would ruin international trust. Lin listens to them all with the expression of a man hearing rain on a roof. Inevitable, irrelevant, and already accounted for. When the deadline passes, he tightens the circle. Water supplies are cut off. Food deliveries stopped. Letters cannot leave the compound. For 6 long days, the foreigners sit in their houses, sweating through their linen and calculating the exact price of stubbornness. In the end, Charles Elliot, the British Superintendent of Trade, agrees to surrender everything. not because he believes in Lin's moral crusade, but because he needs an excuse to blame someone later. He declares the opium property of the British Crown, signs a receipt, and hands it all over. Lin Zexu accepts the keys with no expression. What happens next is remembered not just as punishment, but as ceremony. At a place called Human, near the mouth of the Pearl River, the confiscated opium is brought in by the ton, 20,000 chests, each containing roughly 100 pounds. Workers in straw hats stack them like bricks of sin. Lin watches from a raised platform, robes white against the dark river. The crowd stretches for miles. Soldiers, merchants, peasants, even a few curious foreigners, all waiting to see what happens when morality is given a match. On the first day, workers break open the chests and pour the brown resin into long trenches lined with stone. They add lime and salt, then flood the pits with seawater. The mixture hisses and bubbles, releasing a smell that bites the air, bitter, chemical, final. For 23 days, the destruction continues. Every morning the smoke rises. Every night it drifts back over the city. The people of Canton begin to believe the sky itself is cleansing. Someone later calculates that over 1 million kilograms of opium were destroyed. Though no one in the crowd thinks in numbers, they think in metaphors, the empire exhaling its sickness, washing its lungs with fire and brine. Lin Zexu stands there each day, calm, unblinking. To some, he looks like a saint. To others, a fool. History will call him both. In his quarters that evening, he writes a letter. Not to a fellow official, but to Queen Victoria herself. A gesture both polite and bold. He appeals not as an enemy, but as a fellow ruler. "We do not send you poison," he writes. "Why must you send it to us?" The letter is dignified, almost gentle, an argument of civilization against profit. He sends it north with full ceremony. It will never reach her. Instead, it will be printed in London newspapers, read by merchants over breakfast, and quietly mocked. Meanwhile, in the factories, the merchants grind their teeth. They claim compensation from their government, insisting that Lin has destroyed their lawful property. The outrage builds like thunder over the South China Sea. The British press calls for justice, which in empire language means war. But tonight you are still in Canton, standing on the shore at Human. The last pits are nearly empty. The workers wade through thick, dark sludge, shoveling it into the river. The tide carries it away, staining the water for miles. The sunset turns the smoke into ribbons of gold and grey. People say the river smelled of lime and salvation for weeks. You watch Lin Zexu as he leaves the site. He looks neither triumphant nor tired, only steady, as though he knows what he's done is both right and ruinous. Somewhere in his mind, he must sense what will follow. Empires do not accept humiliation quietly. The flower that learned to sail has found new guardians, and they are not the forgiving kind. Back in the city, merchants whisper. Some curse Lin's name, others admire his courage. Haokwa says nothing. He merely closes his ledgers, seals them in lacquer boxes and sends them upriver for safekeeping. The night is quiet, but the silence feels fragile, the kind that comes before the first cannon fire. You walk home under a sky still streaked with smoke from the burning pits. The scent of lime and salt lingers on the breeze. Somewhere far across the ocean, another man is sharpening his pen, preparing to turn outrage into invasion. You don't know his name yet. Soon, everyone will. The wind that once smelled of reform now carries iron. The smoke has barely cleared from Human when the letters begin to travel. Long sheets of indignation written in London ink. Merchants who have lost their fortunes do what merchants always do. They demand vengeance wrapped in the language of justice. Across the sea, editors sharpen their pens and call Lin Zexu a tyrant. Parliament debates the price of honour per chest of opium. And on the Pearl River, the first hints of war move like distant thunder. But here in Canton, you feel it first as silence. The factories, the tall, white trading houses along the river, sit behind locked gates. The air around them feels tight. No boats come in or out. Soldiers watch the entrances, rifles gleaming in the sunlight. Inside, the foreign merchants pace like caged animals, trapped by their own arrogance. Charles Elliot, the British superintendent, writes letters of protest that no one reads. He keeps his hair combed, his uniform clean, as if order itself could be a shield. Outside the walls, Lin Zexu's men stand in perfect stillness, waiting. Water supplies are cut, food deliveries stopped. What began as moral reform now smells like siege. For days, nothing happens. The river glitters in the heat, pretending to be calm. Then one morning, a cannon fires from a British ship anchored just beyond the harbour. The sound rolls through the city like a sermon in a language no one wants to learn. Smoke rises, pigeons scatter, and the people of Canton realise the argument has changed shape. In the foreign compound, merchants rush to the windows. Some cheer the sound. Salvation at last. Others go pale. They know what it means when empire decides to make a point. Elliot gathers his staff, his voice low but trembling with pride. "We will not be insulted," he says. The phrase sounds brave, though it's mostly hungry. Lin Zexu responds not with speeches but with walls. He orders new fortifications along the river's edge, cannons repolished, gunners drilled. The local artisans work night and day, pouring iron, shaping cannonballs, believing that sincerity can substitute for technology. They pray before the first volley, and for a moment their confidence feels almost contagious. The first exchange is clumsy and brief. British warships, armed with long-range guns, stay just out of reach. Their cannon fire lands with terrifying precision, tearing through Chinese junks that can barely move against the tide. The smoke smells of iron and salt. The sound shakes the air itself. By evening, the river is scattered with splinters and silence. The next morning, British officers sip tea on deck while the city burns faintly in the distance. You walk through the aftermath. The fort walls are cracked open, stones blackened and wet. Soldiers carry their wounded without speaking. Children pick through the rubble, collecting bits of metal that once pretended to be glory. Lin Zexu stands among them, his white robe streaked with dust. He looks not defeated but disappointed, as though history has chosen to skip the part where righteousness wins. He writes another report to the emperor. It is long, respectful, painfully honest. He describes the enemy's ships, steam-powered, iron-plated, immune to wind and tide. They move without oars, he writes. They breathe fire. The emperor far away in his marble halls cannot picture it. He sends back an edict of encouragement and a poem about perseverance. Lin reads it once and folds it neatly away. In the markets, rumours multiply faster than the truth. Some say the British have magic weapons, others whisper that their soldiers never die. Ordinary people begin to leave the city carrying what little they can on their backs. The roads fill with carts and silence. The merchants who remain talk only of indemnities and insurance. Haokwa closes his warehouses and sends his servants home. War, he says softly, is just accounting with louder tools. At night, the factories glow faintly from inside. The foreign merchants dine under chandeliers, pretending the war is elsewhere. They drink wine and argue about tariffs, as if the world outside the window were not already tilting. In one room, a missionary prays aloud, his voice shaking the glass. "Let there be peace," he whispers. No one listens. Peace has become unprofitable. A week later, British troops land further down the coast. They capture forts, then cities, moving like a slow, deliberate tide. The Qing soldiers fight bravely but hopelessly. Their gunpowder is damp, their cannons misfire. Their orders arrive weeks late by horseback. For every life lost, another report is written in elegant calligraphy, sealing failure beneath formality. One evening, You stand on the same riverbank where the first opium chests once arrived. The smell of smoke has changed. No longer the sweet poppy, but the sharp, metallic scent of gunfire. The sky is streaked with the orange glow of burning warehouses. You can almost hear the laughter from the banquet months ago, echoing faintly under the roar of cannon. The party that ate the empire has finally reached its bill. Lin Zexu does not run. He stays until the last order is carried out, until the last report is written. Then he's recalled to Beijing, not for failure, but for making everyone uncomfortable with his success at truth. He leaves Canton quietly, his carriage moving north through the same villages that once cheered his mission. People bow as he passes. Some shout blessings. He does not look out the window. Behind him, the British ships anchor deeper upriver. The siege of the factories has become a siege of an entire nation. And yet, in the strange arithmetic of history, both sides think they are right. The British call it free trade. The Chinese call it moral defence. The truth, somewhere between the smoke and the sea, has already been swallowed by the tide. That night, you sit by the river and listen to the sound of the waves hitting the ruined docks. The water glows faintly with ash and moonlight. A fisherman nearby murmurs, "The river eats everything." You nod. Empires, silver, principles, all of it eventually flows out to sea, where the current is strong enough to erase who started the fight. You look toward the horizon. Out there, the ships float calmly, lights blinking like distant stars. The Empire sleeps fitfully, dreaming of victory in an age that no longer plays by its rules. The war moves north like a fever. One by one, the coastal cities wake to the sound of cannons they've never seen before. In every port, the same confusion repeats. Messengers gallop through narrow streets shouting orders that no longer matter, and villagers climb rooftops to watch the sea catch fire. From a distance, it almost looks beautiful. Grey water, white sails, black smoke curling upward like a new kind of cloud. You travel with the fleet of rumours more than armies. News outruns horses now, carried by sailors, traders, frightened officials. They all speak of the same miracle and the same terror. Steamships. No wind, no oars, no dependence on the moods of heaven. Just the relentless hiss of iron lungs. The British call one of their ships the Nemesis, a name chosen without irony. It glides upriver like a floating forge, armoured, hungry, indifferent to weather or distance. People on the shore stare at it as though it were alive. It breathes smoke and spits flame, its engines growling like an animal that has no word in Chinese. Local poets try to describe it. Some call it a dragon, others a ghost of the industrial age. The metaphor doesn't help. The results are the same. The junk sent to fight it burn within minutes. Their wooden hulls crack like kindling. Men jump into the river to escape the heat, but the water itself steams around them. You stand among the onlookers as Nemesis passes. The smell is sharp, iron, coal, salt, and a faint sweetness of burning tea crates from a nearby warehouse. The sound is worse. A constant rhythmic heartbeat of machinery, something new and unnatural to ears raised on drums and gongs. Even the gulls fly wider circles now, avoiding the trail of smoke. For the first time, you feel the shape of modernity. It isn't clean or noble. It smells of oil and screams. The empire that once believed in balance and harmony now faces a world powered by imbalance, by speed, heat, and greed. And yet the soldiers on shore still fight with dignity. They load cannons that can barely reach half the distance, and they bow before firing. Tradition and technology meet, and tradition politely loses. When the British capture the island of Chusan, the news arrives in Beijing 2 months late. The emperor listens to the report in silence. The courtiers whisper that it's only a temporary setback, but their voices wobble. The war has exposed something no one wants to name. The empire's armour is made of ceremony. Meanwhile, foreign ships blockade the coast. In one harbour, Entire fleets of Chinese junks are burned, their crews watching helplessly from the beach. The flames rise high enough to turn night into day. You can smell the tar and resin from miles away. Someone beside you murmurs, "It's like watching our ancestors disappear." You nod, but the truth feels heavier than words. At Canton, merchants count their losses and their opportunities. Trade never really stops, it just changes costume. Smugglers now deal in information instead of opium. Some guide British officers through unfamiliar waters, others sell maps, gunpowder, even translators. Hauqua keeps his distance, refusing to speak publicly. He understands that neutrality is the most profitable form of morality. As the war spreads, cities that once prided themselves on refinement begin to look worn. The courtyards fill with refugees. The marketplaces echo with unfamiliar accents. In taverns, men argue over who to blame. The emperor, the foreigners, the merchants, the gods. No one mentions the flower that started it all. It has already become invisible, absorbed into the background of history's smoke. In the spring of 1841, the British fleet moves up the Yangtze. The Chinese forces fight bravely at the Bogue forts, but bravery cannot outshoot steam. The forts fall within hours. Cannonballs tear through stone like paper screens. The defenders reload again and again, shouting the names of ancestors into the roar of iron. By sunset, the river glows with drifting wreckage. You wander through the ruins after the battle. The smell of burnt rope and wet clay hangs in the air. A single temple still stands, its roof half collapsed. Inside, the statue of a guardian deity has lost its face to shrapnel. Someone has placed a broken musket at its feet, as if to ask for forgiveness. Later, aboard a captured junk, a British officer writes a letter home. The enemy fights with courage, he admits, but their weapons belong to another century. His tone is half admiration, half boredom. Progress, he believes, is destiny. The river disagrees. It carries the dead downstream with quiet efficiency, as though nothing important has happened. Farther north, at Ningbo and Shanghai, the pattern repeats. A few hours of resistance, then the flag changes colour. The local officials bow, surrendering with the practiced grace of people who have surrendered many times before. Treaties are signed under tents that still smell of gunpowder. The ink dries fast in the coastal wind. Through it all, Lin Zexu remains in Beijing, out of favour, out of command. The emperor has replaced him with generals who promise quick victories and easier reports. None of them deliver. One writes that the British are invincible because they carry thunder in their ships. Another suggests praying to the river gods for calm tides. The court nods gravely. Ritual replaces reason again. You spend a night on a hill overlooking the Yangtze. Below, the foreign ships anchor like dark constellations. Their lamps flicker on the water, steady and unnatural. The noise of their engines never stops. A heartbeat for an empire that isn't yours. Beside you, a young soldier stares down at them and asks, "Do they ever sleep?" You shake your head. Machines don't dream. That's what makes them terrifying. By now, silver has stopped flowing into China altogether. It moves in the other direction, feeding the war effort of those who came to collect debts disguised as diplomacy. But you don't need numbers to feel the loss. The markets are empty. The temples echo. Even the birds sound quieter. As dawn rises over the river, you realize that the age of silk, soft, patient and slow, has met the age of steam, loud, fast and endless. The meeting was brief and one-sided. One offered beauty, the other efficiency. The world chose efficiency. You close your eyes for a moment, breathing in the smell of coal and river mist. Somewhere in the distance a whistle blows, long and low, like a sigh. The war is not over yet, but its ending is already written in the smoke. Empires built on ritual can survive almost anything, except the day the future stops asking permission. The machines keep humming long after the cannons fall silent. In Beijing, The air still smells of incense and confidence. Courtiers walk the polished marble halls in slow steps, their silk robes whispering as if they too are trying not to bring bad news. Every report from the south arrives folded, sealed, and softened. The words are careful, but the smoke between the lines is hard to hide. You are there, in the Hall of Supreme Harmony, where light filters through yellow silk curtains and lands on faces that no longer know how to change expression. The Emperor sits beneath the dragon throne, silent, composed, surrounded by scrolls he will never read in full. The officials kneel in rows. They speak of strange foreign ships that breathe smoke and spit fire, of cities that surrender faster than orders can be written. But the Emperor waves a hand. Heaven protects the righteous, he says. The words sound ancient and safe. They are neither. Some ministers nod so quickly it looks like prayer. Others stare at the floor, counting the tiles. One young advisor dares to whisper, "Their ships move without sails, Your Majesty. Their guns reach beyond sight." The Emperor frowns. "Then build bigger walls," he says. The hall murmurs in approval. No one mentions that walls do not float. Outside, the sky over the capital is pale and still. You can almost hear the Empire breathing, slow, shallow, proud. The war has already reached the Pearl River, then spread north, but news travels at the speed of bureaucracy. In each province, reports are edited for optimism before they climb the hierarchy. By the time they reach the throne, defeat has turned into temporary inconvenience. Meanwhile, along the southern coast, the real story unfolds without ceremony. The Battle of the Bogue Forts has ended in ruin. The British ships move like black beetles, steady and unstoppable. The Chinese cannons thunder bravely, but their iron balls fall short, splashing harmlessly into the tide. The soldiers fight on, loyal to a heaven that no longer takes sides. By nightfall, the forts are broken, the survivors scattered, and the Empire's illusion of invincibility shattered like porcelain. When word finally reaches Beijing, it arrives with the sound of excuses. Officials say the generals lacked discipline, or that storms favoured the enemy, or that traitors whispered bad luck into the wind. No one mentions the truth, that courage alone cannot bend the laws of physics. The Emperor listens patiently. Then he orders the treasury to pay what he calls a gesture of peace. 6 million silver coins, a fortune large enough to rebuild a dozen cities. The sum is delivered downriver in heavy carts, guarded by soldiers who don't know whether they are protecting treasure or confession. As they roll through each village, people line the roads in silence. Some bow, others weep, no one cheers. At Canton, the payment is presented to the British commanders. The foreigners call it a ransom. The Chinese call it a donation for harmony. Both sides sign the papers with the same polite detachment you might use when confirming a dinner reservation. One British officer writes in his diary that evening, "Cheaper than rebuilding a city." Back in Xiasta, Beijing, the Emperor receives the news and nods. The courtiers breathe again. For a few weeks, peace seems possible, but silver has memory, and once it leaves the treasury, it does not come back. Within months, the provinces feel the absence. Unpaid soldiers, late stipends, empty granaries. Peasants begin to whisper that heaven's favour can't be measured in coin after all. You walk through the capital's markets. The merchants still sell silk and porcelain, but the crowds are thinner. You hear talk of price changes, of silver worth more today than yesterday, of goods suddenly too expensive to move. The Empire's heartbeat slows in rhythm with its currency. Yet in the Forbidden City, the tea still pours from jade cups and the music still plays for visiting nobles. Ritual continues because it knows no other language. That evening, a scholar in the Hanlin Academy copies a poem for his students. The dragon sleeps beneath the clouds, unaware the mountain burns. He laughs softly, then hides the paper in a drawer. Even truth needs disguise when spoken too soon. In the palace courtyard, mandarins release doves into the twilight, symbolic gestures of harmony. The birds rise, circle, and vanish into a horizon now thick with storm. Somewhere far to the south, the British fleet gathers again. They have tasted both victory and silver, and both are addictive. At dinner, the Emperor asks about the foreign barbarians. "Do they now obey?" he says. The minister bows low. "They have accepted our generosity, Your Majesty." The answer is true. In the narrow way lies can be. The Emperor smiles faintly, satisfied. He quotes a proverb, "When the wind blows too hard, even fire must bow." No one dares to point out that the wind now carries gunpowder. Outside, in the quiet alleys of the capital, a courier gallops through the night. He carries a new report, one that no one will want to read, that more ports have fallen, that British ships have moved up the Yangtze, that Nanjing itself may soon be surrounded. The courier rides fast, but he might as well be moving backward in time. Each mile north takes him further into denial. You watch the palace from a distance. Its roofs gleam gold in the moonlight, perfect and untouched. The empire inside those walls still believes it is eternal. The smoke from the south has not yet reached the sky above Beijing, but you can smell it in the wind, faint, metallic, and patient. Soon, the courtiers will open their morning scrolls and find another loss written in elegant calligraphy. They will kneel, recite platitudes, and promise that heaven remains on their side. The emperor will sip his tea, serene as ever, and the sound of cannon fire, faint but steady, will keep echoing somewhere beyond the marble gates. The empire does not collapse all at once. It forgets, one report at a time. The summer of 1842 drifts in hot and airless, the kind of season where everything feels heavy, even time. The war that began with smoke and pride now ends with paper and ink. You are standing on the deck of a British warship moored outside Nanjing, a city trembling behind its walls. The vessel's name is Cornwallis, a ship made of iron, wood, and certainty. Around you, officers in pressed uniforms speak softly, as if conducting a business deal rather than an empire's surrender. Across the river, the Chinese envoys approach in small boats. Their robes are immaculate despite the heat. You can tell they have rehearsed the journey in silence, each one aware that history rarely forgives good manners. The boats bump gently against the warship's hull. Ladders drop. The men climb aboard with the careful dignity of those trying not to slip while carrying the weight of 2,000 years. The air smells of oil, river mud, and wet parchment. Inside the captain's cabin, tables have been cleared for the treaty. The documents lie waiting, the edges held down by polished silver weights so they won't curl in the humidity. One British clerk tests his pen on a scrap of paper, nods in satisfaction, and begins preparing the ink. A Chinese official glances at him. Just a moment of quiet disbelief that so much suffering can be condensed into a sentence beginning with Article 1. When everyone is seated, there is no speech, no ceremony, only the sound of writing. The room feels smaller with every stroke of the pen. The treaty is called the Treaty of Nanjing. Its words are plain, but each one removes a piece of the world that used to exist. China will pay 21 million silver coins to cover the cost of the war. The figure sounds exact and reasonable, like an invoice. In truth, it is more money than some kingdoms have seen in a lifetime. 5 ports, Canton, Amoy, Foochow, Ningbo, and Shanghai, must open to foreign trade. Hong Kong, a rocky island no one has cared about until now, is ceded in perpetuity. It sounds gentle, almost poetic until you translate it. It means forever. One of the Chinese envoys, an older scholar named Qing, leans over to stamp the imperial seal. For a heartbeat, his hand hesitates. His eyes close, then open again, and the red ink touches the page. It looks like blood blooming in water. Another official silently wipes his face with a sleeve. Whether it is sweat or tears doesn't matter. Both mean the same thing. A British officer clears his throat not out of cruelty but boredom. The signatures are finished. The copies are compared, rolled, tied with ribbon. Someone remarks that it's almost lunchtime. Outside, cannons fire a salute, not to victory, but to paperwork. On the shore, the people of Nanjing watch smoke rise from the ship's guns and mistake it for renewed battle. They run, hide, pray. By evening they learn it was only a ritual, a sound to mark the beginning of peace. Yet the peace feels heavier than war. You walk along the riverbank after sunset. The air is still, thick with heat. You can see the silhouettes of the foreign ships against the stars floating like dark mountains. Somewhere, music drifts from a British deck, a violin thin and distant. On the opposite bank, Chinese soldiers sit by campfires, their uniforms tattered, their eyes hollow. They eat quietly, not speaking, as if afraid that words might make the day real. The silver payment begins soon after. Carts roll out from provincial treasuries, wheels groaning under the weight. Each coin has been melted, cast, and counted by hand. Villages line the roads to watch them pass, the way people once watched imperial processions. Only now the procession goes the other way, away from the capital, away from the people, toward the sea. Children run alongside, reaching out to touch a fortune that no longer belongs to them. The soldiers guarding the wagons don't look down. They've been told to keep their eyes on the horizon. Back in Beijing, the emperor receives news of the treaty. He listens in silence, the room so quiet that the rustle of his robe sounds like thunder. The courtiers fall to their knees. No one dares to meet his gaze. He asks only one question: do they still call me son of heaven? No one answers. The next day, official proclamations are posted throughout the empire. They describe the treaty as a temporary arrangement for the restoration of order. The phrasing is deliberate, comforting, false. People read it in the streets, nod politely, and pretend not to notice the missing pieces in their world. The empire's map, once shaped like a dragon, has lost its tail and part of its breath. In Canton, merchants reopen their shops. The foreign factories glow with new lights. Trade resumes, louder than before, as if war had only been a pause between profits. The tea shipments flow again, accompanied now by something far more intoxicating: legal opium, wrapped in the language of free trade. The same ships that carried destruction now carry contracts and hope, which are sometimes the same thing. You stand on a hill overlooking the river. The wind stirs the grass, and for a moment the sound almost resembles applause. Below, men unload crates of silver, each one stamped with the emperor's mark, a signature of defeat. They stack them neatly beside the docks where British officers wait to count. One coin slips, hits the ground, and rolls into the water. You watch the ripples fade. Even the river seems tired. Later, a scholar writes in his journal, 2,000 years of empire reduced to footnotes in another man's ledger. The phrase spreads quietly, copied by hand, whispered in tea houses. It's not rebellion. It's memory practicing its endurance. Night falls. The ships on the river light their lanterns one by one. You can hear the rustle of parchment inside the cabins, the faint clink of silver bars, the sigh of tired men convincing themselves they've done something civilized. But the river knows better. It carries the reflection of each, lamp downstream, stretching the light until it disappears. Somewhere far away, the first of many treaties has been signed, and an old world has quietly exhaled its last breath. Morning returns to the capital with its usual rituals. Incense, bells, officials shuffling through corridors lined with red pillars. But something invisible has changed. The air feels heavier, as if the city itself knows that the world beneath its feet has shifted. News of the treaty has arrived. It travels quietly, wrapped in euphemism, carried by couriers who speak in careful tones. You follow one such courier as he enters the forbidden city. His robe is dusty, his eyes hollow from the long ride north. He kneels, presents the sealed report, and lowers his head. The emperor's attendants take it with gloved hands as if the paper itself could burn. In another hall, a scribe reads the words aloud, each one slower than the last. The courtiers listen with their faces trained to stillness. When he reaches the phrase, "Session of Hong Kong in perpetuity," someone coughs to break the silence. The emperor sits motionless. For a long time, he says nothing. Then softly, "The Son of Heaven bows only to heaven." His voice sounds steady, but his hands are trembling on the armrests of his throne. The courtiers bow lower, not sure whether the gesture means loyalty or pity. Outside, in the city streets, the news takes on different shapes. In tea houses, people whisper the words Nanjing Treaty as though it were a curse. Farmers in distant provinces hear rumours of lost silver and foreign ports, and wonder how that could possibly affect their fields. The answer arrives quickly enough. New taxes, higher quotas, harsher collectors. The cost of a lost war is always measured in the sound of coins leaving the hands of those who never fought it. In one province, you watch as a caravan of carts rattles down a dirt road. Each one is piled high with wooden chests filled with silver, the emperor's indemnity travelling toward the sea. Soldiers walk beside them, sweating under the sun, spears glinting faintly. The coins jingle softly with each bump of the wheels. A sad metallic lullaby for a wounded empire. A peasant woman along the roadside mutters, "Blood from stones." She's right. The chests are full, but the granaries behind her are empty. At a village school, an old teacher tries to explain what has happened. He draws a map on the board, a simple outline of the empire, and marks the ports now open to foreigners. His students stare, uncomprehending. One small boy raises a hand. "Master," he asks, "are the barbarians stronger than heaven?" The teacher pauses for a long time, chalk hovering in the air. Finally he says, "Perhaps heaven favours those who use their minds." That evening the teacher sits outside his home staring at the sunset. His neighbour joins him, sipping weak tea. They talk about the foreigners' inventions, ships that move without sails, weapons that roar like thunder. "If such things are possible," the teacher murmurs, "then perhaps our world is not as perfect as we were told." His neighbour shrugs. "Then we must learn their tricks," he says. The teacher nods, though his eyes look far away. Defeat has turned into curiosity, and curiosity is the quietest form of rebellion. In the cities, change begins to stir. Students read translations of Western books, squinting at strange alphabets that promise new power. A few scholars advocate self-strengthening, a polite way to say, copy the enemy before they copy us again. Blacksmiths study foreign rifles. Artisans experiment with glass and steel. The empire, for all its pride, has started to study the world that humbled it. Still, progress moves slower than grief. The treasury empties faster than it fills. Corruption flourishes where hope once lived. In the palace, the emperor retreats deeper into ceremony. More rituals, longer prayers, endless banquets of reassurance. The courtiers applaud each word he speaks, careful not to notice that the empire's language now sounds more like eulogy than command. You walk through a provincial market where merchants count their losses. A trader from Canton complains that the foreigners now set the prices, the weights, even the language of contracts. "Law now speaks with an accent," he says bitterly. His friend replies, "At least it still speaks." They laugh, but it isn't a happy sound. The flow of silver continues outward, like breath leaving a dying man. Peasants pawn their harvest before they are even planted. The government levies war recovery taxes, collecting from provinces that never saw battle. In one town, a tax collector collapses from exhaustion. The local people build a small shrine where he fell. They call it the place where the empire took too much. One night, you find yourself standing near a river outside the capital. The water glows faintly in the moonlight, reflecting the distant lights of the Forbidden City. A small group of soldiers passes, escorting another cart of silver southward. Their boots crunch in rhythm on the gravel road. You can hear one of them humming softly, an old marching tune that once celebrated victory. It sounds strange now, like a lullaby for something that refuses to rest. You close your eyes and listen. The empire breathes differently now. It's shallower, but alive. The humiliation has settled deep into the soil, but something else has taken root beside it. An uneasy resolve, a quiet willingness to adapt. The teacher's words echo in your mind. Perhaps heaven favours those who use their minds. In that moment, you realise the truth that no proclamation can hide. Defeat, though bitter, has forced the empire to look outward. The Son of Heaven may still bow to no one, but his people have begun to stand differently. Eyes open, heads tilted toward the future. The night wind carries the sound of wheels in the distance, silver rolling south, knowledge rolling north. The two will meet again someday, when balance finally learns to speak a new language. For now, the Empire sleeps uneasily, its dreams full of smoke, machines, and strange alphabets. But beneath the silence, something small and alive begins to stir. Defeat, in its quiet way, has started to teach. The world turns, and somewhere between resignation and trade, a new city begins to glow. It is Shanghai, year 1845, a port reborn by treaty, carved from the empire's pride and handed to foreign hands like a well-located apology. You arrive by riverboat at dawn. The fog smells of coal and salt, of tea and ambition. Through the mist you see the outlines of something strange, a skyline that doesn't belong here, wide streets where there used to be alleys, brick buildings where there used to be courtyards, lamps that burn without oil, and signs written in a language that curves the wrong way. It feels like someone took a corner of London and dropped it on Chinese soil, forgetting to ask permission. The streets are wider than the imagination of any city planner in Beijing. Gas lamps line the roads, glowing like captured stars. Horse-drawn carriages rattle across cobblestones imported from who knows where. The air hums with unfamiliar rhythms, the ring of factory hammers, the shouts of sailors, the click of foreign shoes against stone. You step into the crowd and listen. Around you, a dozen languages blend into one tired song. English, Cantonese, Hokkien, even fragments of French and Portuguese. Shopkeepers bark prices in whatever tongue brings profit fastest. Children chase each other through the marketplace, slipping between traders whose hats and accents look borrowed from distant worlds. The British call their new district the settlement. It's a word that sounds peaceful, but really means control dressed as courtesy. They build their own police force, their own courts, their own post office. Even their clocks tick on a different schedule, set to London time as if the sun itself needed an empire. On one corner stands a small stone courthouse. Inside, the air smells of chalk dust and moral certainty. A trial is underway. A British sailor accused of killing a Chinese porter after a drunken argument. The witnesses whisper their accounts. The judge listens with polite detachment, and the verdict arrives as swiftly as a handshake. 3 months in jail to be served in a cell with clean sheets and imported gin. The audience murmurs. Someone in the back mutters, "Law now speaks with an accent." No one argues. They all know accents carry weight. Outside, the market continues as if justice were just another luxury item, expensive, foreign, and sold out. Chinese merchants pay rent in silver to landlords who cannot pronounce their names. Taxes collected from Chinese hands rebuild. British wharves. Even the church bells seem to ring slightly off-key, their echoes bouncing strangely in the humid air. And yet, not everything feels stolen. There is something electric in the air, something half wrong and half thrilling. The foreign quarter smells not just of smoke and arrogance, but also of new possibilities. Steam engines hiss by the docks, winches creak, and cables snap taut as ships unload cargo from every corner of the earth. Tea leaves from Fujian, cotton from India, sugar from the Caribbean. The world's arteries now converge here, pulsing through Shanghai like blood through a transplanted heart. You wander down a side street where a Chinese craftsman polishes glass lamps for foreign buyers. His hands are steady, his English halting. "Good money," he says, then shrugs. "Not ours." His apprentice listens closely to the foreign customers, mimicking their words, their gestures, their rhythm. He's barely 12, but already fluent in survival. In the evenings, the city glows. Lanterns mingle with gaslight, incense smoke with cigar smoke. Tea houses stand beside taverns. A poet recites Tang verses near the doorway of a British club. Somewhere in between, a man sells fried dumplings to sailors who call him chef because they can't remember his name. Cultures meet not with dialogue, but with exhaustion, too busy counting coins to question destiny. Further inland, Chinese officials observe it all from a distance. Some call it corruption, others call it modernity. "The foreigners build quickly," one says, "but their souls look tired." His companion replies, "Better a tired soul than an empty stomach." No one writes this in the reports. The empire prefers its contradictions hidden. By 1847, Shanghai has become a city of two realities. On one side, the foreign concessions, orderly, efficient, ruled by contracts and clock towers. On the other, the Chinese city, crowded, chaotic, still governed by habit and gossip. Between them runs an invisible border, thinner than a street and thicker than history. You can cross it in 3 steps, but not in one lifetime. At night, you stand on the Bund, the foreign waterfront, watching the reflection of lamps on the Huangpu River. British officers stroll past in white uniforms, their laughter echoing over the water. Across the river, Chinese families light incense at temple shrines, their prayers rising like smoke that can't find a direction. The river lies between them, glittering with fragments of both worlds. You hear a story from a dock worker that one of the new foreign merchants tried opium for the first time last week. He said it made him feel weightless, like a cloud with dividends. The irony drifts through the air like the smoke itself, the poison now circling back to its source. Trade has a dark sense of humour. Still, life continues. New shops open, new ships arrive, new coins change hands. The empire adapts because it must. A teacher in a nearby school asks his students to write essays about the modern world. One boy writes, "The foreigners defeated us because they learned faster." The teacher doesn't correct him. He only says, "Then learn faster still." You walk home past the lamps that never flicker, the streets that never sleep. Somewhere behind you, a ship horn sounds long and low, a metallic sigh across the river. The city breathes in and out, part dream, part machine. Shanghai is no longer just a place. It's a conversation that never stops, spoken in borrowed words and bought time. Law speaks with an accent. Money speaks with every accent. And beneath it all, history listens, taking notes in silence. As the night wind brushes your face, you realise this new peace isn't really peace at all. It's a pause between storms, a foreign calm rented by the hour, paid for in silver and pride. But for now, the lamps are bright, the streets are live, and the river carries its reflections toward the sea. The years roll forward like slow thunder over the plains. The empire breathes, but unevenly. In the south, poppies still bloom and silver still leaks toward the sea. In the north, temples crumble, schools close, and famine creeps quietly through the countryside. You travel through provinces where the rivers run brown, and the people's faces look carved from fatigue. Everywhere, one phrase repeats like a prayer turned sour. The foreigners broke China with their opium and their gunboats. But history never stops at blame. It always finds someone ready to rebuild what was broken, even if they must do it with smoke and prophecy. His name is Hongxiu Quan. You hear of him first through whispers, a scholar who failed his exams too many times and began to dream too vividly. They say he fell ill, saw visions, and awoke convinced that heaven had chosen him. He wasn't just a man anymore, he was a messenger, a younger brother to Jesus himself, come to cleanse China of corruption, idolatry, and foreigners alike. He renamed the chaos in his heart the heavenly kingdom. You meet his followers in a small village outside Guangzhou. They gather in a makeshift hall that once served as an opium warehouse. The irony doesn't escape anyone. The air smells of incense and sweat, of wood smoke and hope. A young preacher stands before them, his voice trembling but clear. The smoke that poisoned us will now purify us, he declares. The crowd shouts, Amen! The sound rises like thunder wrapped in prayer. You stand at the edge of the room, watching the faces flicker in the lamplight. Peasants, soldiers, widows, students. Their eyes are bright with a kind of faith that feels almost chemical. They believe that the empire's fall was not a defeat, but a test, that heaven has chosen them to start over, to build a kingdom where the weak will be strong and the righteous will no longer need silver to matter. In the fields, outside, banners flap in the wind, red cloth painted with white characters for heavenly peace. The words sound simple, but the movement behind them grows with frightening speed. Villages join, armies form, and soon the countryside burns again. This time not for trade, but for salvation. You travel with the rebels for a time, if only to understand the shape of their conviction. They march barefoot, singing hymns that mix Bible verses with local proverbs. Some carry muskets, others hoes and spears. Their leader preaches that God favours those who fight for justice, and justice now means revolution. In their songs, smoke becomes scripture, a visible reminder that fire too can be holy. Back in Beijing, the court calls them heretics, but the court has called everything heresy at least once. Soldiers are dispatched to the south, led by generals who still fight wars as if they were written in calligraphy. The rebels fight like wildfire, moving fast, unpredictable, fueled by hunger and revelation. Within a year, whole provinces fall under the banner of the heavenly kingdom. You stand on a hill overlooking Nanjing again, the same city where the treaty was signed, now claimed by rebels as their capital. The city walls are covered in new slogans: destroy demons, build heaven. Inside, the new rulers abolish foot binding, ban opium, and rewrite the calendar. The reforms are real, but so is the chaos. When faith becomes government, paperwork doesn't stand a chance. Hong Xiuquan holds court in a palace filled with hymns and incense. His robe is simple, his tone almost gentle. He speaks of equality and purity, of a world washed clean of sin. But outside, famine and war continue. Faith cannot feed armies forever. The heavenly kingdom, born from pain, begins to devour itself. You visit a battlefield after one of their defeats. The ground is littered with broken drums, torn banners, and fragments of hymn books. A soldier kneels beside a small fire, feeding the pages of a Bible into the flames one by one. Heaven didn't answer, he mutters. The smoke curls upward, spelling no words, carrying no salvation. In the Empire's official reports, the rebellion is labelled treason. In the villages, it's remembered as cleansing. In truth, it's both. A fever that tried to sweat out an old disease. The war lasts 14 years. It kills more people than the opium ever did. Whole families vanish, towns are erased, and the Empire's map begins to look like a wounded animal. When the dust finally settles, the heavenly kingdom collapses under its own weight. Hong Xiuquan dies in his palace, surrounded by starving followers still waiting for a miracle. The imperial army takes back the city, finding nothing heavenly left, only ashes and hymns. But even in defeat, something has changed. The rebellion burned faith into the empire's bloodstream. From now on, every protest will sound like a sermon. Every dream of justice will come with a hint of divine impatience. You walk through the ruins of Nanjing where smoke still clings to the stones. Children play near the walls, collecting bullet casings as if they were charms. One of them hums an old Taiping hymn without knowing what it means. The melody drifts through the air, blending with the smell of burnt rice and incense. You realise that this war, like the last, wasn't about victory. It was about memory, the stubborn human need to make suffering mean something. The empire may have survived, but its heart has cracked in new ways. And through those cracks, the modern world will seep in, slow and unstoppable. As the sun sets, the sky glows red over the river. Not with fire this time, but with reflection. For a moment, it's easy to imagine that the colour is not blood or flame, but something gentler. Redemption. Still practicing how to arrive. You would think one humiliation would be enough for a lifetime. But empires, like people, often repeat the mistakes they've not yet understood. It is the year 1856. The South is restless again, the coffers are thin, and the air feels brittle, like porcelain waiting for one careless touch to shatter it. The spark this time is a ship, a small, forgettable vessel called the Arrow, registered in Hong Kong flying the Union Jack like a talisman. Chinese officials board it near Canton, arresting its crew for suspected piracy. Technically, they have the right. Politically, they have just stepped on the tail of a sleeping empire that never forgets its pride. Within days, British diplomats are outraged, newspapers are indignant, and the phrase national honour begins to glow like a lantern with too much oil. They have insulted our flag, declares one headline. It sounds noble enough to justify almost anything. The British send demands, then gunboats. The Chinese send apologies, then excuses. Neither side listens. History clears its throat. You stand on the docks of Canton again, watching foreign ships approach from the horizon. Sleek, modern, impatient. The smell of coal smoke fills the wind, sharp and bitter. Lin Zexu is long gone now. His brand of honesty has no place in this new diplomacy. In his absence, confusion reigns. Provincial governors argue over who should respond. The court in Beijing debates whether to pretend nothing happened. In the end, indecision becomes policy, and the cannons begin to speak for everyone. The first bombardment turns night into daylight. The sky flashes white, then red, then grey. Buildings crumble like sandcastles meeting the tide. British and French forces move together now, partners in trade, in faith, and in opportunism. The war is polite at first, with formal declarations and carefully worded communiques. Then it becomes what wars always become: noise, smoke, and hunger. You travel with the refugees fleeing inland. The roads are crowded with families carrying everything they can: furniture, children. Silence. A woman passes you with a cage of songbirds covered by cloth. She refuses to abandon them. They remember better days, she says. Behind her, the sky glows orange. In the north, Beijing tries to stay calm. The emperor's advisors assure him that foreign powers will tire of war once they've made their point. They underestimate how profitable points can be. By 1860, the Allied armies march toward the capital itself. The city's gates are tall, proud, and entirely ornamental against artillery. You arrive in time to see the camps outside Beijing, tents stretching for miles, the air thick with the smell of leather, gun oil, and wet earth. French soldiers smoke idly, British officers polish their boots, and local guides draw maps in the dirt. They talk about routes, not reasons. Empires rarely need reasons once the machinery is running. When the Allied troops finally breach the defences, the city doesn't resist much. The court has fled. The wind carries the sound of looting, a metallic symphony of drawers opening, coins spilling, glass breaking. But the moment everyone remembers comes a few days later, just northwest of the city, at the Summer Palace. It was not just a palace, it was a world. Lakes, pavilions, gardens designed to make the soul believe in eternity. Poets once said that the air there was so calm even time forgot to move. On the day the soldiers arrive, time catches up. You walk through the gardens as they burn. The flames move like dancers, graceful and merciless. Roof tiles crack, paintings curl, silk banners drift upward as ash. The smell is indescribable. Lacquer, paper, jasmine, history. One British officer watching the fire writes later that it was the most beautiful crime in human memory. He meant it sincerely. For 3 days the palace burns. The lake reflects the flames, turning serenity into spectacle. Soldiers wander through halls where emperors once prayed for balance. They pocket jade, porcelain, scrolls, anything small enough to fit into a bag. Even the peacocks vanish, roasted for supper by men who never learned their names. When the last tower collapses, the sky turns grey with floating ash that looks almost like snow. The wind scatters it across the plains, a storm of burned dreams drifting toward the capital. In the streets, people mistake it for real snow and open their palms to catch it. Only later do they realise what they're holding, the dust of their own civilization. The emperor, hearing the news in his northern refuge, says nothing for a long time. Finally he whispers, "Even heaven must mourn." His aides record it as an official statement. History will remember it as understatement. You stand among the ruins when the soldiers leave. The ground is warm under your feet, as if the earth itself remembers too vividly. The ponds are filled with ash and reflection. Somewhere a single bell rings from a temple that wasn't looted only because one thought it worth the trouble. Its tone is clear, almost pure. It sounds like morning learning to sing. After the armies withdraw, diplomats return with papers. The ink is dry before the tears are. The treaties that follow, Tianjin then Peking, promise peace in words and exploitation in practice. Opium is legalized. Foreigners may travel anywhere, trade anything, preach whatever they like. China, the Middle Kingdom, becomes a middle market. You walk away from the smoking gardens as dusk falls. The horizon is a faint smear of red. You can still smell perfume in the air, mingled with soot. The empire will rebuild its palaces one day, but it will never rebuild the illusion that heaven protects the righteous. That idea went up with the silk. In the end, the Second Opium War was never about pirates or flags. It was about control, about who gets to decide what peace means. The treaties will call it progress. The poets will call it betrayal. History, as always, will call it inevitable. As night settles, the wind shifts, carrying the scent of ash out over the plains. Somewhere a peasant lights a lamp. A merchant closes his shop. A child recites a lesson about loyalty. Life resumes its small, stubborn rhythm. But above them all, the stars blink faintly through the haze. Quiet witnesses to a civilization that learned, too late, how easily paradise burns. Morning light filters weakly through the haze, carrying with it the smell of burnt lacquer and damp stone. The city of Beijing wakes from its humiliation, as though waking from a fever dream. The summer palace is gone, the smoke still clinging to the hills like a ghost that refuses to leave. Foreign troops have withdrawn, but their shadows remain, long, patient, and uninvited. You walk through streets where silence has learned new shapes. The walls are scorched, the air smells faintly of ash and metal, and the people move as if the ground beneath them has become unreliable. In tea houses they whisper about the Tianjin treaties, the Peking conventions, words that sound legal but feel like scars. The empire has signed away not only its land but its reflection. The new treaties open the gates wide. Foreigners can now travel anywhere, preach anywhere, buy almost anything, and answer to their own courts rather than China's. Missionaries arrive carrying crosses and promises. Merchants arrive carrying ledgers and smiles. Soldiers arrive pretending they never left. It is said that one can now ride from Canton to the Great Wall and never once be beyond the reach of a foreign flag. The Chinese scholars call it the age of broken mirrors. Everywhere they look, they see themselves through someone else's glass. Maps are redrawn with foreign handwriting. Laws are rewritten in foreign idioms. Even the currency is stamped with faces that don't belong. The empire, once the world's measuring stick, has become the subject of another's arithmetic. You find a mirror seller in the market one afternoon. His stall is small, his wares old, Cracked bronze mirrors from forgotten dynasties hang beside polished glass imported from England. Which sells better, you ask? He shrugs. The old ones. At least their cracks are ours. The phrase stays with you as you wander through the city. Churches rise where temples once stood. Telegraph wires stretch above streets still paved with cobblestones. You hear the faint hum of electricity, a sound that feels both thrilling and intrusive, like the future clearing its throat in a borrowed room. In one of the new foreign schools, Chinese students learn to pronounce words that taste like iron and smoke. Economics, physics, liberty. The teacher, a missionary with a kind voice, writes the words on the blackboard as if each one is a seed. Some of the students take notes diligently. Others glance toward the window, uncertain whether knowledge borrowed from conquerors can ever feel clean. Back in the countryside, rebellion still flickers. Bandits call themselves patriots. Patriots call themselves reformers. Everyone calls themselves saviours, and everyone carries an opinion about heaven's silence. Taxes rise again to pay the indemnities of the new treaties. Peasants mutter that even the gods have been taxed. You stop at a small village where the river runs slow and yellow. An old scholar sits beneath a willow tree, writing with a brush that has lost half its bristles. He looks up as you pass and says, "The Empire is sick." You nod, but he shakes his head. "No," he adds, "not dying. Sick people dream of recovery." His ink drips onto the paper, a dark blot spreading like spilled thought. In Beijing, the emperor's officials send envoys abroad, to London, to Paris, even to Washington. They are told to observe, to learn, to report. They come back describing trains that move without horses, cities lit by invisible fire, nations that treat merchants as heroes. The emperor listens, eyes half closed, and sighs. "They are barbarians," he says softly, "but efficient ones." By the 1870s, opium has become fully legal. The flower that once floated quietly in the shadows now blooms in daylight. Local cultivation spreads across provinces like Ruma, Yunnan, Sichuan, Guizhou. Hills once covered in rice now ripple with pale pink blossoms. Officials tax it, calling it agricultural progress. Farmers smile thinly, saying, "If they poisoned us, we might as well grow the poison." The empire's revenues rise again, but the irony is unbearable. The same substance that once emptied its coffers now fills them. Economists in foreign journals call it a clever adaptation. The peasants call it selling the sickness. You walk through a poppy field one morning. The wind moves gently, stirring the flowers until they look like a sea of delicate ghosts. The air is sweet, heavy, and a little nauseating. In the cities, foreign bankers build stone headquarters that look more permanent than palaces. Their clocks strike the hour precisely, as if time itself now belongs to someone else. Young Chinese clerks in neatly pressed coats take notes in ledgers printed in English. They do their jobs well, because survival has become an art of quiet imitation. A journalist in Shanghai writes that China has become a civilization waiting for permission. His article is banned, of course, but copied by hand and passed from reader to reader like contraband wisdom. In it, he describes the treaties as a mirror shattered, each shard reflecting a different version of ourselves. The metaphor spreads, because it feels true. You visit a tea house where scholars gather to argue quietly about the future. One insists that the empire must return to Confucian virtue. Another argues for Western science. A third says nothing, just stares into his cup as if the answer might be floating there. At last he murmurs, "Perhaps the future will come whether we invite it or not." The others nod, unwilling to agree but unable to disagree. Night falls over the city. The foreign quarter shines with lamps and laughter. The old neighbourhoods sit in shadow. The sound of a telegraph clicks in the distance. The new heartbeat of the empire, impersonal but precise. Somewhere a missionary's bell rings for evening service. Somewhere else, an opium pipe cracks in the heat of a small lamp. Progress and decay now share the same rhythm. You walk once more past the mirror seller's stall. The cracked bronze mirrors glint in the lamplight, their surfaces uneven, scattering reflections like shards of memory. You pick one up. In its surface, your face looks fractured but whole enough to recognize. You set it down carefully and whisper to no one. The Empire still sees itself, just not all at once. Above you, the night sky's clouded, but a few stars manage to push through. Their light, travelling for centuries, falls on palaces, churches, factories, and fields of opium. The Empire stands amid its contradictions, wounded, humiliated, but still dreaming. The mirrors are broken, yes, but even broken mirrors can still catch the light. Morning mist settles over the hills of Yunnan like a slow sigh. The fields stretch endlessly, soft and pink, shimmering with dew. From a distance it looks like paradise, a landscape painted with tenderness. Only when you walk closer do you realise what's growing there. Poppies, thousands of them, their petals delicate as silk, their beauty paid for in memory. A farmer bends low among the blossoms, his fingers careful, almost reverent. With a thin blade, he scratches the green skin of the seed pod, and a pale sap oozes out. He lets it dry in the sun before scraping it into small dark lumps. Each one will soon travel downriver, then across the world. He hums softly as he works. If they poisoned us, he murmurs, we might as well grow the poison. It is the 1870s now. The warships have sailed home, the treaties have been signed, and the Empire, too proud to die, has decided to live on whatever is left. Opium has become not a shame, but a system. The officials call it domestic cultivation, a phrase that sounds respectable, like a garden instead of a graveyard. Taxes from the poppy fields keep the provincial treasuries afloat. Local governors write reports praising agricultural innovation. The central government pretends not to notice that its survival now depends on addiction. The Empire's taxes, one scholar writes, now smell of smoke. You travel through the countryside, passing villages where the air feels sweet and heavy. In the evenings, families sit outside their homes, pipes glowing softly in the dusk. Old men smoke to ease their bones. Young ones smoke to forget their hunger. Even the local priests smoke, though they call it meditation. The scent drifts through the streets like perfume made from resignation. In the market, opium is weighed on brass scales with the same care once reserved for silver. The merchants speak of grades and quality, of colour and burn with a connoisseur's precision. This one comes from Yunnan, a trader tells you proudly. Strong but clean. The smoke doesn't cling, he grins, best in the Empire. His pride is sincere, though the irony could make the gods wince. The economic reports are glowing. Trade flourishes, the balance of silver improves. Even foreign buyers take interest, a reversal so neat that it borders on absurd. What was once the Empire's curse has become its livelihood. The flower that destroyed the nation now finances its endurance. Beauty and irony share the same stem. In the capital, officials debate morality over dinner. One suggests banning the drug again. Another shakes his head. Better to rule a poisoned kingdom than no kingdom at all. They laugh politely, their faces glowing in lamplight, the scent of smoke trailing faintly from a corner of the room. You meet a teacher in a small town near the Burmese border. His school has no desks, only mats and a blackboard darkened by years of chalk. We teach the children mathematics, he says. They must learn to count something more honest than silver. He points toward the fields beyond the window. The farmers there count the flowers. I count the days until we stop. At night, you stay with a family whose walls are paper thin and whose stories are older than memory. The father smokes before bed, exhaling through his nose like a man praying to sleep. The mother mends a torn sleeve under the weak glow of an oil lamp. Their son, barely 12, writes his lessons by its light. He draws maps of provinces he's never seen, tracing rivers that have carried too much sorrow. When he finishes, he folds the paper carefully and says, "One day, I'll see where the smoke goes." Outside, the wind moves, gently through the poppies. They sway in waves, petals whispering against one another. The moonlight turns the fields into a silver ocean. It is breathtaking, and impossible to forget what it costs. Each flower is a promise and a debt, blooming from the same root. By the 1890s, poppy fields cover entire regions. Officials boast of record harvests, merchants celebrate booming exports, and moralists write essays no one reads. Progress, says one newspaper, has many fragrances. You walk past the printing house where that paper was made, and the air smells faintly of ink, sweat, and opium smoke. Yet beneath the prosperity, the empire trembles. Corruption runs deep. Soldiers are paid in smoke instead of coin. The addicts no longer hide. They lounge in public parlours, reclining on wooden benches, their eyes half closed as if the world were too bright. The addiction has ceased to be a shame. It has become a condition of existence. The empire's body is still warm, but its breath comes slow. In Shanghai, the foreign merchants watch all this with amusement. They've become their own suppliers, one remarks, sipping imported whiskey. Another laughs. Efficiency at last. The joke travels across the room like a coin tossed in a well, shallow and echoing. And yet, the story isn't all despair. Amid the haze, small awakenings stir. Reformers whisper of change, of railways, of industry, of schools that teach science instead of scripture. "We have learned enough from ruin," one young scholar writes. "Let us now learn from reason." But reason grows slowly in soil fed by resignation. One evening, as the sun sets behind the poppy hills, you meet a group of farmers finishing their day's work. Their hands are stained, their eyes tired but gentle. One of them looks up at the glowing fields and says, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" You nod. "Terribly," you answer. When the wind blows, the flowers ripple like waves of silk, each petal trembling under the weight of light. The sight is almost holy, the kind of beauty that hurts to look at for too long. Somewhere behind you, a temple bell rings, the sound carrying across the valley. It feels like both blessing and warning. You realize, standing there, that the empire has found its reflection again. Not in mirrors, but in these fields, fragile, luminous, and built entirely on contradiction. Prosperity and decay now bloom from the same soil, each feeding the other in quiet harmony. As night falls, the scent of poppy fills the air. The fields glow pale under the moon, endless and silent. From a distance, it could be mistaken for peace. Up close, you know better. It is survival, beautiful, terrible, and entirely human. The century is turning, and the empire is standing very still. Not from peace, but from paralysis. You're in a hall of mirrors somewhere in Europe, though it could be any capital where power dines in silk. Around you, the air smells faintly of paper, tobacco, and self-satisfaction. On a long mahogany table lies a map of China, bright, wide, and trembling slightly in the draught from an open window. Men in white gloves lean over it, their movements graceful, practiced. They speak in French, in English, in German. Their accents differ, but the tone is identical, calm, confident, charitable. One slides a ruler across the map, lining it up with a river he has never seen. Another traces a coastline with the tip of his pen as if drawing a lover's shoulder. A third takes out a silver knife, not to cut food, but to cut the map. The rustle of parchment mixes with the clink of wine glasses. Servants refill them quietly, as though history itself required hydration. Someone laughs. The sound is polite, almost musical. You realize you are watching a performance of civilization at its most efficient. International cooperation, they call it. A new phrase for an old appetite. Each empire claims its reason. Russia wants a railway, Germany a port, Britain a sphere of influence. France wants to save souls, which conveniently comes with mineral rights. America, newer and hungrier, asks for an open door, pretending not to notice that the room already smells of theft. They talk of balance, order, progress, the vocabulary of gentlemen rearranging someone else's future. Back in Beijing, the Qing court receives their demands with a mixture of fury and fatigue. The emperor's ministers study the maps and find themselves reduced to spectators of geography. They divide our rivers as if they were wine, one official whispers. Another replies, at least they drink well. Humour has become the only form of courage that doesn't end in punishment. The term that begins to circulate in the foreign press is oddly cheerful. The carving of the Chinese melon. The image is grotesque and accurate. Every great power arrives with its knife, eager to claim a slice. Russia reaches for Manchuria. Germany takes Shandong. Britain tightens its hold on Hong Kong and the Yangtze. France collects the south, wrapping its ambition in missionary robes. Even Japan, a student-turned-competitor, steps forward to claim Taiwan. You can almost hear the melon being cut, clean, wet, final. In the diplomatic salons, the talk is about modernization, cooperation and opportunity. The Chinese are ancient but adaptable, one statesman says between sips of claret. They will thank us in time. Another nods, tracing his finger along a mountain range. A splendid partition, he murmurs. No one laughs, because no one finds it funny. Meanwhile, in China's cities, the news arrives slowly and unevenly. Newspapers print maps coloured in foreign tints, but few people can read them. Merchants feel the change first. New tariffs, new flags, new rules written in unfamiliar languages. Farmers barely notice until soldiers march through their fields. When they do, they bow politely, not yet, realising that the uniforms have changed but the hunger remains. You stand in a provincial market one afternoon, listening to a storyteller recount the legend of the carved melon. He holds up a map drawn in charcoal, the edges smudged by his fingers. Each foreign power took a bite, he says, and the fruit bled silver. The crowd listens in silence. No one asks whether it's true. Myths, after all, are only history written in emotional ink. The empire's diplomats scramble to slow the slicing. They sign more treaties, send more tributes, promise reforms, all while the knives keep moving. Concessions, they call them, a word that sounds polite enough to hide its bruises. You read the official proclamations, each one written with the poise of a suicide note pretending to be correspondence. At one reception in St. Petersburg, a Russian official proposes a toast to the future of China. He raises his glass, smiling. The guests echo him cheerfully. You can almost hear the echo travelling east, crossing frozen rivers, reaching the villages where peasants are already selling their sons to pay new taxes imposed to cover foreign debts. In Shanghai, the foreign banks multiply. Their marble pillars gleam in the sunlight, taller than temples. Clerks count coins behind iron grills, and translators turn local sorrow into ledgers. The city skyline begins to look like a portfolio. On a clear day, you can stand at the harbour and see flags from half the world fluttering above ships that all carry the same silence of certainty. An old scholar in Suzhou writes a poem that spreads quickly, copied by hand across the provinces. They measure the dragon, not its shadow. They cut the melon, not its bitterness. No one dares to publish it, but everyone remembers the lines. By the 1890s, China's map looks like a patchwork quilt stitched by strangers. The coastal ports hum with foreign songs, while the interior starves quietly on its own terms. The court still sends envoys to Europe, desperate to learn diplomacy, but by the time they arrive, the borders have already been redrawn. The empire is still large enough to look alive, but every artery now ends in someone else's hand. One evening, you stand in a European embassy, watching diplomats admire their handiwork. The lamps glow, the glasses clink, the maps shine under candlelight. Someone says, "Gentlemen, the Orient has been opened." They mean it as triumph, but it sounds like a diagnosis. Outside, the snow begins to fall, soft, clean, and indifferent. It lands on the carriages, on the rooftops, on the world's most civilized theft. And somewhere, far away, under another sky, farmers in Yunnan bend once more to their fields, cutting poppy pods, humming quietly, unaware that their labour now belongs to a geography they'll never see. The carving of the Chinese melon is complete. No one claps, but everyone drinks. The map, now scarred by lines and signatures, lies still. On the table, a servant folds it carefully as if tidying a dinner napkin. History's appetite for the moment is satisfied. You arrive by train, though it doesn't feel like China when you step off. The station clock reads London time. The signs are written twice, once in Chinese characters, once in perfect Roman letters. A boy in a uniform salutes you and carries your bag without asking. The air smells of coal and perfume, a foreign mixture of industry and vanity. This is Shanghai again, but also not. It has become a new experiment, a city that speaks with too many accents to remember its own. The streets stretch wide, lined with plane trees brought from France and lampposts ordered from Birmingham. Tramcars glide along metal rails, humming with a confidence that the empire itself has forgotten. Church bells chime the hour while market vendors shout over them in local dialects. A missionary hands out pamphlets promising salvation. A street musician plays a bamboo flute that drifts between the ringing bells like a ghost trying to remember its language. You walk along the Bund, that long riverfront parade of ambition. The foreign buildings rise in neat, arrogant rows, neoclassical banks, Gothic churches, British clubs where ceiling fans turn lazily above imported gin. Each structure looks as though it expects the river to bow before it. Across the water, the Chinese neighbourhoods still sprawl in their tangled lanes, dense and uneven, smelling of soy, ink and sweat. Between the two worlds runs the Huangpu River, not wide, but impossibly deep. Everywhere, progress hums. The first telegraph lines string across the sky like thin black cobwebs. Streetlights burn through the mist. Newspapers print in 2 languages, arguing in both. Photographs hang in shop windows, capturing faces that already look half European. Men in suits, women in tailored shangzas, children standing stiffly in borrowed modernity. The city has learned to imitate the world that conquered it, hoping that imitation might one day mean equality. At a cafe near the French concession, you sit among diplomats and dreamers. The furniture is rattan, the floor cool marble. A gramophone spins a waltz. A Chinese poet reads quietly in the corner, translating Baudelaire into Mandarin, his cigarette smoke curling like punctuation between 2 worlds. A British businessman leans back in his chair, smiling. "See," he says, "we've civilised them." He gestures toward the street where a rickshaw puller staggers past in the rain. The irony is so sharp you can almost hear it cut the air. Tianjin tells a similar story. Its river smells of rust and soap, its streets lined with embassies built like miniature versions of Europe. A Russian Orthodox church stands beside a British customs house, and both seem equally confused by the humidity. Children play outside, shouting in a blend of languages that no empire can claim. At night, lights glitter over the water, and from a distance the city looks modern, until you notice that half of those lights belong to neighbourhoods forbidden to half its citizens. Progress has arrived, but ownership has not. Foreign banks decide the interest rates. Foreign judges decide the verdicts. Foreign soldiers walk the boulevards politely, their boots shining brighter than the faces that stare after them. Civilization, it turns out, can be imported by the crate, as long as you don't ask who owns the harbour. You visit a school established by an American missionary society. The students sit in neat rows reciting English phrases: freedom, charity, commerce. Their voices are careful, musical, obedient. The teacher smiles proudly, unaware that outside the window workers march through the streets shouting slogans about rent and hunger. The two kinds of education never meet. One trains minds, the other trains desperation. At night, the foreign districts glow like a separate constellation. Gas lamps line the boulevards, trams rattle past the consulates, and jazz bands echo from hotel ballrooms. The Chinese quarters nearby remain dim, the alleys narrow, the air thick with cooking smoke and laughter. From above, the city must look divided between light and memory. You can almost imagine the stars looking down and wondering which side to call real. You meet an old man selling maps on a corner. His booth is little more than a wooden crate covered in newspapers. Each map shows the new Shanghai, foreign concessions coloured neatly, Chinese streets drawn faint and grey. Do people buy these? You ask. He nods. Mostly foreigners. Then, lowering his voice, they like to see where they live. We only live where we remember. In one of the grand hotels, a group of Western writers gathers for a banquet. They talk about the romance of the Orient, about how the East is awakening, as if the country were a child rubbing its eyes. You notice how easily they confuse observation with ownership. Their laughter drifts out the open windows, mingling with the cries of the night hawkers below. The sound feels like a conversation that will never quite meet in the middle, and yet, despite everything, there is a strange vitality here, a pulse beneath the contradiction. You pass a shop selling Western medicines beside a stall offering herbal remedies. The two owners greet each other every morning, share tea and argue about which cures more patients. Progress, it seems, has a sense of humour. The next morning the city wakes early. Church bells ring, factory whistles answer. The sky above the river blushes faintly pink. You watch fishermen push their small boats past steamships. One man hums a folk tune as he rows, the same melody his grandfather might have sung before any treaty, any conquest, any glass building. The rhythm of human persistence, unchanged. A group of children runs past you on the quay, chasing a red paper kite. It lifts into the sky, flapping between the chimneys and telegraph wires. For a moment it rises higher than the flags of any nation. Then the string catches, and the kite drifts down, settling in the shadow of the customs house clock. The boy who flew it stares up, squinting into the sun, unsure whether he has lost something or learned how high he can reach. As you walk back through the city, the bells fade, replaced by the softer chorus of markets waking, vendors setting out baskets of fruit, porters shouting, tram wheels clattering on rails, the old and new blend like paint swirling in water, not mixed, not separate, still deciding what colour they want to be. You realise then that Shanghai, Tianjin, and all the treaty ports have not truly forgotten their names. They're simply waiting for someone to pronounce them differently. Not in foreign tongues, not in nostalgia, but in voices that belong again. The day grows brighter. The tram lines glint in the sunlight, and somewhere, in the quiet between church bells and market cries, you can almost hear it. The city remembering how to say its own name. Summer, 1900. The sky over northern China is a dull, trembling grey. The air smells of dust and gun oil, incense and fear. You can feel it long before you hear it. The sense that something ancient is about to try one last time to stand up straight. The foreigners call it the Boxer Rebellion. The people who fight in it do not call it anything at all. They are farmers, monks and labourers, bare feet, bound fists, yellow talismans tied around their arms. They believe the spirits of their ancestors will stop bullets. Some of them even believe it works. Desperation is a powerful armour when nothing else fits. You first see them at dusk outside Tianjin, hundreds of men and women moving like a tide of dust. They chant as they march, half prayer, half curse. Support the Qing, destroy the foreigners. It sounds heroic if you ignore how hollow it rings against the thunder of approaching trains. They carry swords against rifles, faith against steel. For a brief moment, the world feels like it has turned back 2 centuries. In Beijing, the Forbidden City trembles. The court has spent half a lifetime bowing and apologizing, and now the peasants are demanding blood instead. The Empress Dowager, brilliant and terrifying, sees in the Boxers both a threat and a tool. If the gods wish to punish the foreigners, she says, we should not stand in their way. She offers her blessing with the careful enthusiasm of someone handing a lit candle to a child and telling them to be careful. The foreigners fortify their legations, their walled compounds of marble and arrogance. British, French, German, American, Russian, Italian, Austrian, Japanese. All the flags of progress neatly arranged in the middle of Beijing. Inside they store food, ammunition and disbelief. Outside, the Boxers gather by the thousands. The city fills with smoke and chanting. Some carry torches, some carry Bibles stolen from churches and rewritten in rage. When the fighting begins, it is chaos disguised as destiny. Fire leaps from one district to another. Shops burn, temples crumble, and the night glows the colour of dying silk. The sound is relentless. Rifles cracking, bells clanging, the deep drumbeat of feet pounding the cobblestones. Somewhere, a man screams prayers to a god who's never heard of foreign artillery. You stand at the edge of the old city wall and watch the strange symmetry unfold. Inside the foreign quarter, Western soldiers form ranks, their bayonets glittering in the firelight. Outside, the Boxers shout ancient incantations, their blades raised high. For a moment, both sides look equally certain that heaven is on their side. Then the machine guns open. Certainty loses. The siege lasts 55 days. 55 nights of smoke, hunger, and fear. The missionaries pray. The diplomats ration whiskey. The Chinese soldiers nearby alternate between fighting and watching, unsure which side the future belongs to. Messages are sent by carrier pigeon, the last elegant detail of a city falling apart. In late August, the Foreign Relief Force arrives. 8 nations marching together under the banner of civilization, their boots shining, their rifles clean. Russians from the north, Japanese from the east, Europeans from the west. A unity so precise it almost hides its violence. International cooperation, one correspondent calls it, at its most effective. The irony is that no one notices it's also at its most confident. The Allied troops move through Beijing's gates like a tide of order washing over chaos. Their boots strike marble floors that once echoed only with the steps of courtiers. Temples become barracks, palaces become command posts. The Forbidden City is spared from burning only because the generals want to tour it first. Inside, the Dragon Throne stands empty under layers of dust, the last symbol of an empire pretending it still has meaning. Outside, the soldiers loot freely. Gold statues vanish, paintings disappear. What cannot be carried is destroyed. In one courtyard, a British soldier lights his pipe with a page torn from a Confucian classic. A French officer pockets a jade figurine, murmuring that it will look splendid on his mantle. The Japanese general takes a calligraphy scroll and bows to it before rolling it up. Civilization, ever courteous, knows how to steal politely. When the shooting stops, the silence feels heavier than the noise ever did. The streets are littered with spent shells, burnt carts and uncounted bodies. The air smells of lime and exhaustion. The Boxers are gone, scattered like ash in the wind. The Empress Dowager flees in disguise, carried in a cart covered with straw. The empire survives, but only in the way old trees survive lightning, standing but hollowed. The victors gather to write another treaty. They call it the Boxer Protocol. The language is clean and professional. China will pay about 450 million silver coins as indemnity, a sum so vast it will take nearly 40 years to finish paying. Foreign troops will remain stationed in Beijing. The empire must apologize for existing too loudly. You picture the meeting: marble tables, crystal decanters, pens scratching in synchronized grace. The same sound as slicing melon years earlier, only neater this time. History once again, cleans up after itself. In one small courtyard near the ruins of a temple, a group of children play among the rubble. They find an old boxer banner and use it as a blanket. A monk watches them and sighs. The ghosts, he says, have paid their rent. You walk through the city at dusk. The sun is setting behind the broken rooftops, the light catching on twisted iron and cracked stone. Somewhere a band plays a march for the departing troops, brass and drums echoing down the empty streets. The rhythm is triumphant, but the melody sounds tired. You pause in front of a shattered mirror hanging from a burned wall. The glass is warped, fractured. In it, you see your reflection bending through the cracks, multiplied, fading. The Empire is there too, still visible, still breathing but in pieces. The marble floors gleam again soon enough. Foreign troops drill in the Forbidden City, their boots tapping out a new anthem of order. The same floors that once felt the quiet shuffle of scholars now echo with commands barked in 8 languages. Every step is both victory and violation, and so ends the last revolt of the old world, a war fought by ghosts, settled by bankers, remembered mostly by the defeated. The Empire continues, technically, but the spirit that once filled its temples has gone elsewhere. When night falls, the smoke drifts upward and thins into stars. You can almost imagine the ancestors looking down, their eyes unreadable. Perhaps they're proud, perhaps they're just tired of watching. The century exhales. What remains is not silence exactly, but something quieter. The kind of hush that comes after a long argument, when there's nothing left to say and everything left to live. The Empire, or what's left of it, walks slowly into the 20th century, carrying both its memory and its mistakes in the same worn sleeve. You find yourself in a small tea shop near the river. The tables are old wood, burnished smooth by generations of elbows. Steam rises from clay cups, fragrant and familiar. An old merchant sits across from you, his robe clean but threadbare, his eyes soft with amusement and exhaustion. He watches the steam curl into the air before speaking. "We were the Middle Kingdom," he says. "Now look at us, surrounded by everyone's idea of progress." He laughs quietly, not bitterly. It seems the world learned to move faster than we learned to wake up. Outside, the streets are noisy with the new century's inventions. Telephones, bicycles, railways that hum like restless thoughts. Shanghai glows with electric lights now. Beijing hums with a new kind of silence. The Empire has fallen in everything but paperwork. Its officials still stamp seals, its courtiers still bow, but their shadows are thin. The opium trade continues for a while longer, too familiar to die quickly, but its shape begins to change. The British merchants, sated at last, move on to other profits. The poppy fields remain, tended by habit more than hope. In the evenings, men still gather to smoke, their eyes drifting somewhere between dream and surrender. But the smoke no longer feels victorious. It feels tired, like a thought repeated too often to matter. You meet one of the last poppy farmers in Yunnan, his face creased like folded paper. He walks you through his field, touching each flower as though it were a prayer bead. "It kept us alive," he says softly, "and it killed us slowly. That seems fair." You ask what he will plant next season. He smiles. Maybe something that can be eaten. By 1909, the government has banned the drug again, this time with real desperation. Propaganda posters bloom where the poppies once did. Paintings of strong men smashing pipes, of mothers throwing out smoke-stained lamps. Inspectors travel the countryside, counting addicts the way earlier generations counted rice. But enforcement depends on fear, and fear never sleeps as soundly as it promises. A decade later, the empire collapses entirely, replaced by a republic that inherits more chaos than authority. Warlords divide the provinces like dinner portions. Each one prints their own currency, enforces their own laws, taxes whatever still breathes. Yet amid the confusion, something remarkable happens. The people begin to imagine a nation not built from obedience, but from endurance. You walk through a school in Nanjing where children recite lessons written by reformers instead of emperors. The teacher writes on the blackboard, "Knowledge is strength." The students whisper it back, uncertain but hopeful, as if testing a new spell. Outside the window, construction workers hammer wooden planks into a half-built bridge. The rhythm of their hammers keeps time with the children's voices. Opium, once the Empire's secret language, becomes a metaphor now. Not just a drug, but a condition. We were addicted, one writer says, to forgetting. Another calls it the habit of powerlessness. Even the reformers speak of it softly, as though the smoke still lingers in the corners of their sentences. By the time the People's Republic is declared in 1949, the poppy fields are mostly gone. The new government wages a campaign with the precision of hunger and the patience of revenge. Addicts are sent to re-education camps, dealers are shot in public squares. It is brutal, but effective. The smoke that haunted a century finally clears. By the mid-1950s, opium addiction, the Empire's longest ghost, has nearly vanished. You visit an old warehouse once used for storing opium chests. It now holds grain. The scent of wheat has replaced the sweetness of decay. On the wall, faded characters still read Foreign Trade Bureau. Someone has crossed out the word foreign with a single heavy brush stroke. Outside, children chase each other through the alleys, laughing, their footsteps echoing where smugglers once whispered. The world has changed, and it smells of dust and morning instead of smoke. Later, you return to the tea shop by the river. The same merchant, older now, pours you a cup. His hands tremble slightly. "Strange, isn't it?" he says. "We lost the empire, the silver, the dreams, but somehow we kept the taste of tea." He smiles. Maybe that's all a civilization ever really owns. The things it does quietly, without thinking, long after history has stopped watching. He raises his cup in a small toast. "To survival," he says. "You raise yours." The steam drifts upward, pale and warm, like the ghost of a forgotten century leaving the room politely. Outside, the city hums with the sounds of another beginning. Bicycles click on cobblestones. Radios crackle with new songs about progress and unity. The smell of factory smoke mixes with the scent of breakfast rice. A train whistle sounds far away, long, low, confident. You look toward the rising sun, its light slanting through thin curtains and catching the dust in the air. Each speck turns gold for a heartbeat before drifting away. Empires, you realize, fall quietly, like ashes after the pipe. But people rebuild. They breathe again. Somewhere a school bell rings. Somewhere else, a factory horn answers. The rhythm of the new century begins, awkward but sincere. It will stumble and break again, of course. They always do. But for now, the air feels cleaner. The world that once dreamed itself eternal has finally woken, blinking into the light. You take one last sip of tea, now gone slightly cold, and listen to the city stretch and yawn. The age of smoke is over. The age of memory begins. And as the sunlight grows stronger, spilling across the table, you think of a poem written long ago in another age of opium and imagination, Coleridge's Kubla Khan. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree. The words drift through your mind like the last exhale of history, a dream built in smoke, ending in silence. Not all at once, but choice by choice, weakness by weakness, until the dream fades and the world wakes.